Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. Well, I wanted to touch on something when you were talking about guardianship because there's some conversations that are being had nationally right now that are making me pretty uncomfortable with taking people that have autism and ADHD and putting them in like the equivalent of a work camp and then not getting their medication. There are some very strange conversations coming up that I find could be a slippery slope into disaster. With guardianship, for example, if anybody is unfamiliar with eugenics, you should Google it. But there are some cases in the U.S. history in the 1920s concerning eugenics where there were judges making decisions on who should be sterilized and who should not be. Mm-hmm. It was bad, really bad. If someone has guardianship of their older child, this is a decision that they could make for them. Sure?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So, if someone really was in need of guardianship, are there other alternatives besides family members if, say, there were family members that themselves or other family members didn't trust to make those decisions or maybe would have some reservations? Like in the most extreme circumstances, where would you point these type of clients to?
Yeah. One thing that we're still behind the eight ball in the state of Indiana on that issue because we don't have the resources that other states do, but they're coming. They're developing. There are a couple of entities that will serve as guardians for folks that don't otherwise have a guardian.
Okay.
Now, and they kind of break down between nonprofit and for-profit.
Sure.
You're going to have more for-profit entities available than the nonprofit. And nonprofits are just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But that's developing. But unfortunately, there's still not enough resources out there for those situations. It's a frustrating experience even for me when we come up with that because we're trying to beat a round peg in a square hole sometimes with those situations because we're, this would be primed for, hey, this organization, because, and let me give a little history here. A lot of professional guardians, historically, they just want to deal with the money because that's where they get paid.
Sure.
And it's less hassle. And, if I'm a guardian of the person, then I have to know that person's diagnosis, prognosis. I have to be involved with their care plans. I have to be involved with their public benefits. I have to be involved with all these things. And there wasn't a lot of resources out there to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, fortunately, we have in Indianapolis now, there are a couple organizations or entities now that will do that. They have medical staff on as part of their organization, and they will serve as guardians of the person or healthcare representatives for families that don't have, for individuals who don't have family members that can do that for them. So that's building, but that's all the for-profit side.
Right.
It's the nonprofit side, which is a good chunk of folks that we're still struggling getting those folks out there. There's volunteers. There's just not enough volunteers.
I was going to ask about that actually. If there are people out there that are curious, willing, or maybe have a particular skill set to help, or if they would want to volunteer somewhere in these type of services, where would you direct them?
Probably somebody like me, just because I know the resource.
So they can call your office and you families.
Yeah, you know what? If someone is interested in volunteering to be a guardian, absolutely, I'll find some place to go.
Okay.
I work with a lot of senior organizations, obviously, that they're always starting for folks. But I also know there's an entity here in Indianapolis that would love to have some additional volunteer guardians. They're always looking for.
Would you like to mention that organization?
It's called CARE.
Okay.
And what the
CARE.
Yeah.
CARE.
CARE. What the acronym stands for, I'm sorry, Ken, I can't remember that. Ken Bennett is a longtime friend of mine, also my boss years ago that started CARE, but he recognized this need of folks that didn't have guardians, so he started this nonprofit to help appoint people. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't have the capacity to serve a lot of people, so he worked with a lot of hospitals, mainly, who have a patient comes in, doesn't have anybody to make a decision, and CARE will help support those individuals. But his organization is always looking for help to serve as guardians. There's also, the state is also establishing a volunteer advocacy database as well, and I can help kind of put somebody in touch with the folks there. I know that's been a push with the Supreme Court of Indiana has been really trying to establish a good guardianship program here in Indiana. There's a good core group of judges, attorneys that are trying to really get this going here in Indiana.
That's great. That's actually some really positive information. Yeah. I've been waiting to hear something like that.
Yeah, we've, we have struggled for years, and it is kind of nice to see that we are kind of making some strides there. Yeah, that in that section.
Would you like to give anybody else a shout out that is working in these type of arenas? Because we might want to talk to them too.
Well, obviously Kim has his for-profit business is called Scout. So, that's, I think highly of them. There's another business called Arrow here in the Indianapolis area.
ARROW?
Yep, they network as well. So just some resources off the top of my head. I know there's others, so my apologies if I'm not remembering everybody here. But
we'll give you a list later.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're always, they're building practices, they're building businesses for folks that don't have the family members to step in and do this. And it's very important.
And for those young people, for example, that are starting their studies or wanting to enter the workforce or maybe interested in transitioning, then maybe they want to do something like what you do. How would you guide them? Would you just say give your office a call, or what would be your recommendations as far as schools to approach, or like specific studies, specific programs? Do you have any suggestion for the younger people?
Absolutely. So a few things. Obviously, law school is a good place to go. But even before, if you're just kind of wanting to see, is this kind of the right fit for me? Elder law attorneys as a group, we're pretty collegial bunch. I met with 5 of my colleagues this morning for breakfast. We do that once a month, for example. We might be competitors on paper, I guess, but we never really see each other as competitors. We support each other. So you can always go to the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. That's NAELA.com.
Okay.
That's the web page. If you're interested, you can do a search for elder law attorneys in Indiana, and I would find someone in your area. Can I intern? I'm going to bring in an intern this summer of a young lady that just reached out to me in the spring and said, I may be interested in what you do, and can I come to your office? And of course, absolutely. I'll take the help and give you some experience at the same time. So internships would be a real good place to start. And I know that a lot of my colleagues would be starved to have that help. We're not the back of phone book attorneys, so we don't have that revenue stream. So folks that are interested, and we can kind of do a quid pro quo of giving you a little experience, but at the same time get some help out of you. Yeah. We'll take it. So don't let that be an impediment. I would start there. There is the state bars. I'm sure Indiana Legal Services has what they call the Senior Law Project. Okay. They're always looking for volunteers there, and that would be a good way to get even a broader scope than what I deal with, because they get into things like seniors who are dealing with bankruptcy and housing issues and things like that. I particularly don't deal with in my practice area. So it's another way to get some experience to see if this is a good fit for me or not. And as far as once you reach law school, again, there's nothing wrong with interns if you can find a part-time job like I did. But beyond that, a lot of schools will, elder law is a kind of a funny area because we take segments of different practices, probate, wills, trust. Those are tools. So it's nice to know those tools. So there's those courses in law school that you can take. Public benefits, that's another course that you can take. So we kind of pull all these things together. But I also know a good friend of mine teaches, she's an adjunct professor at the IU School of Law, and they actually have an elder law course there. So
In Bloomington?
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis,
So
okay.
if you're enrolling in IU Indianapolis, you might want to look for that course.
Okay.
And that she's phenomenal, so I know that.
And
I've
what was
been a
her
sub
name
for Rebecca Geyer.
Right.
Yeah. So she does a great job there. She's also an elder law attorney.
Okay.
And she's been in that job for a few years now. I've been a substitute for one of the classes, so
wow.
I've got one of those as well. But I think it's a great opportunity for you to get a good idea of what an elder law attorney does as well.
Okay. And if someone was interested in interning for you, for example, would they have to be 18, or would you even entertain someone that was younger just to peruse, just to check out some things?
Right now, he might be 18 now, but I have a high school senior that's been interning since January.
Well, the reason I ask is because, I think you do have kids that, or even at the beginning of their studies in high school that might be trying to figure out, what do I want to do? Because trying to apply for colleges and all that, it's starting sooner and sooner, it seems like. So would you entertain someone that was 14 or 15 years old that was interested in learning more?
I probably 16 or higher.
16 or higher.
But someone that has a level of maturity, absolutely, that would come in and help. Our intern now, he's mature beyond his years. I've been very impressed with him. But that come about. Westwood High School has an internship program.
Nice.
And he knew he wanted to be an attorney, so he actually connected with me because he knew me. I've known his mom for years, and he said, "Hey, Kai, I want to do this. They need me to find a place to go." And I said, "Absolutely, you can come in." And he's done a phenomenal job with us. So,
Great.
age doesn't mean much to me. I did have my daughter in here helping probably since she was 12, but that's my daughter. So,
Of course. Well, I think it's important because, how are you really going to know if you like something until you try it? So if you're curious when you're younger, that's why I'm asking these questions.
I think that's just a big thing for life in general. You try it so that what you want to do for a living, you want to get a lot of joy out of this. And I speak from having a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old at home, as they're looking at colleges now, and they're looking at their next phase of life and what are they going to do for a living and so on. And my advice over and over again is, don't chase a dollar figure, don't chase a paycheck, because that means nothing if you're not satisfied and happy with what you do. Find something that you're passionate about, because the joy is going to come from the passion. It's not going to come from the money you're making. Right. Absolutely not. So, and with that said, if you're I really don't know what I'm passionate about, or think maybe this or this, try some things out. I'm a perfect example. If I had stuck on my career path, I may be 25 years in as an FBI agent at this point. So, or state police officer or something to that respect. But I just had the great fortune of getting in with an elder law firm that said, "Yeah, this is where I need to be. I'm passionate about this, and I get a lot of joy out of what I do." So, anybody out there, and let me also say, we need you. I'm 48. I'm now kind of one of the senior elder law attorneys in Indiana, because a lot of my colleagues are starting to retire and move on, and which is kind of an odd thing for me, because I was the kid when we started. I was like the little kid when I started out. So I say that because I'm looking, and I don't know that there's as many coming in, particularly with the population we're serving, coming in to be in this area of law. So It's not like this. It's a place where you're not going to have job security. There's plenty of room for you. So if you have an interest, don't bypass it. We've got room for you.
Well, I think it's important to have good mentors out there, and it sounds like you might be a good mentor. So that's why I'm probing you with all these questions for the young folk.
Absolutely. I like to teach. I've always said if I wasn't doing this, I probably would be in that teaching area. And in fact, we always talk about, I do a lot of education with my clients so they understand why we're talking about what we're doing. But yeah, I like to teach. But the other part is I do feel an obligation to pay back. Since we've been mentioning names, I'd like to. Scott Severance was my first boss. He's still very much a mentor of mine. He kind of took me under his wing and taught me everything I know about the business. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. And it wasn't just teaching me law; it was teaching me life skills.
Sure.
And I had that in my life, and I kind of feel like I need to pass that on, both because I want to, but also I feel like that's my repayment back to him for what he provided me. I want to do that for somebody else. So, Scott, you were about 50 when I started, and I'm about 50, so it's probably made for me to find a Jeff so that I can mentor them and bring them along like you did me.
Well, I think we all have our part to play in our civic duties, do we not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is just part of how we're trying to give back. That's a large reason why we're doing this podcast and trying to find people like you to come and speak. And as we talk, we've spoken about a lot more things than we spoke about in the
we have.
original pre-podcast interview, and I'm really happy about that. And,
at one point, it was, were we going to fill up enough time? But we've done great.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, you've just benchmarked the whole day for us. So I said you can speak until you're finished.
Okay.
So we'll just keep going. Yeah. And I know you have more to speak about here, so let's cover some of that.
Oh, sure. Well, let's talk about another big, I'll call it a pet peeve of mine. But so I hear a lot of families who will say, I'm not going to leave an inheritance to my special needs child because they're going to get knocked off of public benefits.
Yeah.
Or I hear things like, well, I'm going to give, and I excuse me for this term because I really don't like it, but I'm going to leave money to my able-bodied child to take care of my special needs child. Don't do that. And there's the one reason is we don't know what's going to go on with that able-bodied child's life. Their sibling could get married and divorced, and there's some of that money that you set aside is going to go away. Or they could get in an accident and have a judgment against them, and then creditors could eat some of that money up. They could pass away and have no plan, and then that money could go to their kids and so on, who may not take care of their aunt or uncle.
Right.
So there are alternatives to just disinheriting your child. Number one, the special needs trust. Probably a lot of folks in the community have now heard about a special needs trust. A trust is simply a container, and you can put all sorts of stuff in the container. It's set up by a grantor, so usually the parents in this situation or the grantors, they create the trust. And then there's a trustee that's in charge of the trust that follows the instructions of the parents right for the benefit of the child. Now, the trust it accomplishes two things. One, it leaves that inheritance for the child. So you're not disinheriting the child. That matters. You're keeping that inheritance. It's safe. It's there for them. It's earmarked for them. No matter what happens with the other family members, it's always going to be there. But two, the trust is designed so that they can have those monies in trust and still qualify for the public benefits. And it still surprises me when I hear this myth of, well, I can't leave anything because they're going to lose their benefits. We've had this solution for decades now. So that's one thing to consider is don't disinherit because you have that tool. There are other tools besides a special needs trust. Here in the last few years, Congress has created what's called an ABLE account. And what an ABLE account is, practically speaking, it's either a bank account or a brokerage account that's set up through a state program. Every state has one. Indiana, we call it, I think it's Enable, if I remember. something else we'll have to put in the notes. But in any event, we have our own ABLE account, and it's also a place that we can put extra money into that's exempt from the public benefits programs. So that money is there for the beneficiary to use, but it doesn't count against them. It's not a resource for SSI purposes. It's not a resource for Medicaid purposes. Now, there are pros and cons to both. So,
there's a cap on that, right?
There's a cap of how much you can put in per year. It's indexed to the gift tax exclusion, so it's $18,000 is the cap this year. And if you put in more than a certain amount, there's not a cap of how much you can put into it, but and I haven't looked at the inflation numbers, but if you put in it's around 110,000 or more, your SSI can be suspended. Yeah, you still can qualify for Medicaid and so on, but the SSI can be suspended because you have that much money in there. But otherwise, that can have somebody in there as well. It's another way to park money.
And what can they use that money for?
Qualified disability expenses.
Which are?
The great thing about that is there's not much that doesn't qualify for qualified disability expenses. Advocates like me in the community, when these were coming out, when we started reading the regulations that were put out on how you could use these, we were like, wow, this is great. Because there were some restrictions on how special needs trusts could be used that were being applied to ABLE accounts. So while it's not everything in the world, more or less, if it's being used for the beneficiary, if you can think it's workable. Education, housing, that's something that trusts still have to be careful with, is when they're paying for a beneficiary's housing, that could affect their benefit. Whereas an ABLE account, you can pay rent right out of that account.
So if your goal, let's say it's a grandparent's goal, a grandparent can also contribute to an ABLE account, can it not?
It is.
Right. So if your family goal is to make this child as independent as possible, and this child grows into an adult that would like to live on their own, for example, you could contribute in advance to this fund that they could pull out of later to make them more independent and to create the possibility of living on their own.
Exactly. Because that is another, I've missed the whole big key to this whole thing is a special needs trust requires a third party to manage those funds. An ABLE account, the beneficiary themselves manages the ABLE account. Or if they're not of capacity, their guardian or legal representative, but they manage that account themselves.
So in a way, this could be a way that you could give your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren their inheritance now. Sort of.
Could be. And just remember, the only restrictions are the beneficiary has to be considered disabled by the Social Security rules, and that disability has to be onset before the age of 26.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can set up an ABLE account and put money in.
A poor example. I'm just trying to paint a picture for people. Let's say the grandparents don't necessarily trust the parents.
Okay.
And they said, I have $50,000 that I'd like to give to my grandchild that has autism that happens to be 4. I think that I'm probably going to expire by the time they're 18. Would this be a good avenue potentially to pursue for said grandparents?
Well, so we want to look at the entire context of the situation, because there is one drawback to the ABLE account that a special needs trust set up by grandma and grandpa doesn't have, and that is the ABLE account. Anything left in that account at the death of the beneficiary, the state gets first dibs on those funds, get paid back for any Medicaid healthcare services that's paid out on behalf of that beneficiary, or the special needs trust established by grandma and grandpa. I'm being real precise there when I say established by grandma and grandpa, because there's another type of trust as well. Does not have to have that payback clause in it. So we kind of want to evaluate that and how important. Obviously, autism is one thing. We know adults with autism live.
We're just using this as an example. We have to pick one, so we're just going to pick this one first.
But a child with another diagnosis that have shorter lifespan, maybe you won't want to put hundreds of thousands in it. And you don't want to put 18 a year, but you don't want to build up a huge account there that is just going to be given back to the state of Indiana if they don't use it. So you want to make sure that if you're using that, the child's going to be able to use it during their lifetime. And you want them to get the benefit out of it.
Of course.
But that's one way. I've had families use special needs trust and ABLE accounts in tandem as well, where third party controls the 50,000, but they're going to trickle some money into that ABLE account every once in a while, so the child has that money to use as they see fit. ABLE accounts are actually a really cool tool, because another thing that a lot of families will use them for is when the child has a job and they're not spending all of their monthly income, but they got to stay underneath $2,000.
Yes.
Well, rather than willy-nilly spending funds, or setting up a trust account that they're constantly moving money, they can set up an ABLE account and they can just put their excess funds over in an ABLE account every month. Let them have they have their own savings account, essentially what they have. So.
I think it's important that we cover that, because I'm not sure that we did cover that to begin with. You mentioned a $2,000 cap.
Yeah,
Can you speak
we did not, did we? Yeah, so I mentioned there's 30 different categories or so of Medicaid, but the category that most individuals with limitations receive benefits is a category called Medicaid for the disabled. I'm thinking of now remembering some stuff, so I want to mention here.
That's all right, we have time.
Yeah, Medicaid for disabled, that category requires the individual to have under $2,000 in countable assets. But the key there is the ABLE account doesn't count towards that $2,000 limit. A special needs trust doesn't count towards that $2,000 limit. There are other exceptions as well, but those are big things. So when I say, your son is working, making $1,500 a month and still living at home, we don't want to just blow $1,500 a month for the sake of $1,500 a month.
Right.
If they're not spending that, one thing they can do is transfer the excess money over into the ABLE account so that they have that savings there. That way they're not blowing the money and at the same time are able to accumulate some savings, because that is an exempt asset in the program. It doesn't count towards the $2,000 mark. So.
Have you ever seen that show Atypical on Netflix?
I don't think so.
No. You should check it out sometime. I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain about it, but there's a young adult who has autism that has a job in an electronics store. So I think it's a pretty good example of the type of thing that we're talking about here, because let's say you have a child that has autism, for example, that maybe their social skills aren't super, and you would like those to improve a little bit, and you don't want them to lose their benefit, but maybe there is a job like that they have an interest in that they can do, and they just make a little bit of money. So this is the type of example that we're talking about, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about. And why we're talking about that, what popped in my head that I wanted to mention, there is another Medicaid category that is for the working disabled, and it's called MedWorks. And the benefit to this is the eligibility limits for this program are not as stringent as Medicaid for the disabled, so you can earn a lot more per month on that program. There's still an asset limit, but it's not as low as from the disabled. And there were some other exceptions, like a retirement account under MedWorks is exempt. So maybe a child was working at a place where they're contributing to a retirement account. Well, that would count under Medicaid for the disabled, but under MedWorks, it does not. So that's something else that when we're talking about transitions and way back there, I've counseled a lot of clients through that of, okay, I don't think Medicaid for the disabled fits your child, because they're basically working a full-time job, but they need the Medicaid benefits to supplement them. Obviously they need some of the waiver services that come along with the waiver, but also need that as their health insurance. So we're going to switch to the MedWorks program because they're making $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
But we don't want them to lose that benefit. Well, MedWorks that's what that's designed there for. So another 150 things that we're filling out to people today.
Well, yeah, but it's important because as we navigate things, and obviously our kids change. I've got 3 different kids that have 3 different, very different personalities, and I'm not quite sure what their future will look like. And now my oldest is 5, the twins are 3.5. I'm not quite sure what their abilities will be in the future. So that's when we have like these type of conversations, because I think there's a large percentage of the disabled community that they really do have aspirations to work or contribute to society in some aspect. Nobody wants to just sit home. And nobody wants to be told that, if you do this, you're going to lose your benefits. So that's why we're talking about all these things, because we want people to have options. We want them to know what's out there, because I think everybody's ultimate goal, either individually or for the family, is for everyone's life to be as full as it possibly can be.
Absolutely. Well, let me transition to a different topic here, because we talked about Grandma and Grandpa setting up a special needs trust and putting money into the trust for the beneficiary. Well, what happens if Grandma and Grandpa didn't do that? So Grandma and Grandpa says, I'm leaving your son $100,000 and they're receiving COVID benefits. Medicaid for the disabled, they have a $2,000 resource limit, and now they've just inherited $100,000. Are they just out? No, there's not. So they're obviously an enable account doesn't work because we can only put $18,000 in that guy. So what do we do? Well, there is another type of special needs trust that Congress has specifically authorized. This has been around since 1993. Okay. It's a windfall that Congress we want disabled individuals to have this windfall. And so you'll hear it called a self-settled special needs trust, or a first party special needs trust, or even D4A trust, which is the section of the statute that authorizes these trusts. But what it is, it allows that individual, the beneficiary themselves, to establish their own special needs trust. And there's no limit to what they can put into that special needs trust. So Grandma and Grandpa leaves them $100,000. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose benefits if I don't do anything. They can establish their own special needs trust and put those funds into the trust. Now, obviously, you got to follow the statute. They can't be their own trustee. Somebody else has to be trustee of that trust. And there is a payback clause in that type of trust. That's the trade-off of Congress. Congress has said, you get a windfall, we want you to benefit from that windfall. But if you don't spend it all, we want to make sure we're paying the state for some of these services that you've received during your lifetime. Now, that payback is only to the extent that services have been provided. So it's not like they get all $100,000 back if they've only spent $20,000. They get $20,000 and the rest can go someplace else. But that's another important tool. And in fact, that's the practice where I was talking about working with a lot of trial attorneys. Oftentimes, the trial attorney will work either beneficiaries become disabled because of an accident, or has some limitations and already had public benefits and received that settlement, and now there's $250,000 here. What do we do? Well, a self-settled special needs trust is something we can set up for them so that they don't have to spend it all immediately, or it doesn't get wasted on medical care. They can keep their Medicaid benefits in place and have these funds to supplement them through their lifetime. That's another key tool here to know about and to have. So I wanted to mention that out there as well.
Okay.
A lot of information, of course, when these situations arise, you want to get legal counsel to help you walk through them, because even the special needs trust, there are different trustees. You can have your own trust. You can use a nonprofit organization who has a master trust and account. So the Arc of Indiana has its own master trust, for example.
Okay.
So that $100,000, you don't have to hire a Jeff to write a trust. You can simply call the Arc and say, we want to open an account under your master special needs trust and put this $100,000 in there, and they're the trustee of the trust. So
now,
options.
There would be a timeline, for example, if someone gets a big check like this, how many days are we talking about of a deadline of that money needs to be moved, or you're going to lose services?
Medicaid and SSI, which are our two big programs that we're usually concerned about here, assess eligibility on the beginning of the month, at the stroke of midnight on the beginning of the month. So you got to be below that $2,000 limit if you're in that category by the stroke of midnight on the beginning of the month. So it doesn't matter what happens in the middle of the month, but by the end of the month, before the next month starts, you got to be back below that 2,000.
So it's not a full 30 days.
No.
Okay.
And in fact, if someone's facing this, you want to ask, if it's like an inheritance, the personal representatives getting ready to distribute, you usually want to ask, can you not distribute on the 25th, please? Can you distribute on the 2nd or no later in the 5th so that we have plenty of time to implement these things so we're not scrambling?
So essentially, it's the minute that the check hits your bank account.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, the minute the check is in hand is when it becomes available.
Okay.
And then you have to make sure that those funds are sheltered, spent before the next month, or you lose eligibility for that month.
Okay.
So
that's important. Deadlines are very important.
It is important, I've that's one of the things we're always asking even my trial attorneys. You might want to get this wrapped up on the 30th, but don't do that for us, please. Let's wait till the 1st so that my client has plenty of time to get the trust set up, to get funds into the trust and so on, because the 30th is going to give us enough time.
So that the minute that someone is notified that they are going to receive some sort of inheritance, they should basically call an attorney.
Absolutely.
Like your office, for example.
Yep, absolutely.
That seems like sounding nice.
Very much so. Yeah. You always want to plan ahead. So that's a good segue into my last issue that I have on here. That is, don't wait until the last minute. I'm going to tell a story here. I'm going to use different names for confidentiality purposes,
Sure.
but let's just say I had a client. She was 90. Her name's Margaret. We'll call her Margaret. And she had a son named Fred. Fred, let's see. Can't remember Fred's diagnosis, but Fred has special needs. Fred had lived with her all his life. And in fact, when she left the home and moved into senior living, that senior living allowed Fred to move in with her there. Oh, okay. So she continued to live with Fred and care for Fred. She made no plans on what happens if she can't be the caregiver. One thing, I don't think she just denied that would ever happen. In fact, I know the couple times she told me, I just assumed Fred was going to pass away before I did. Fred was still chugging along at 70 years old. Yeah. And in fact, Fred's still with us today. So, make a long story short, Margaret couldn't take care of Fred anymore. Yeah. And we had no resources for Fred because we didn't have a plan in place. No one was ready to take on Fred's care because no one had said, here's somebody that's going to need some help in the future.
Love it.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you have that contingency plan in place. Margaret, unfortunately, is not an outlier here. I have a lot of clients that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, still caring for their special needs child, and have never made any plan for what happens if I can't do this anymore. And there's so many things that go into that. It's not just housing, it's legal authority, it's making decisions. It's, if they're non-verbal, does anyone know that they don't like mustard on their sandwich?
Sure.
Does anyone, it can be that trivial. And just to think that, okay, Margaret's suddenly went to the hospital, Fred's there, and he's unable to communicate what he likes to eat. We have no idea who his doctors are. We have no idea, anything about him because she's done it all for 71 years.
Yeah, caregiver, translator, all of it.
All of it. And so that just, again, lays out the importance of plan early. You got to plan early. And I'm speaking to you. I'm speaking to the 30-somethings, the 20-somethings back there. the younger crowd, because you never know what might come up. And so you want to make sure that you have some plan in place. Who's going to make decisions? Who's going to care for them? How's this going to be afforded? You know, those are all things. And as I mentioned, one thing that I do with my families as we're putting these plans together is not only do we do the legal stuff, you know, it's such a disservice when you just leave here with a stack of papers.
Yeah.
We dive into the whole family situation of, you know, are there other kids? How are those kids going to fit into this? Particularly if they're still minor kids, how are they going to fit in this? But I have every client, I encourage them to fill out what I call a letter of intent or letter of instruction for their special needs child, because those are those important things that you don't think about. I use that example of mustard.
Yeah.
I did have it was an older client, but he went to a nursing facility and he wasn't able to communicate. And while he was a great eater before he got there, he suddenly wasn't eating anything. And, you know, all the doctor, everyone was just, he must be depressed and that's why he's not eating and so on. Well, come to find out, he doesn't like mustard and the staff was spraying mustard all over everything. And that's why he wasn't eating. And it seems so trivial, but that is something that's important. So if your child can't say, I don't like mustard, you got to put that in your letter of instruction so that the person that is going to step up and care for them knows that. It could tell people, don't put mustard on their sandwich because they're not going to eat it. And, you know, there's other things. Who are their friends? What do they like to do? Those are all things that need to be recorded. Because you just don't overlook these things. And that letter of instruction I found to be very helpful because it helps start thinking about things that even, gosh, I think you're that all the time. I never really thought about that, but yeah, that's a good idea. I really need to make sure somebody is aware of that. So plan early, plan often. Don't be Margaret. Don't wait till there is a crisis and then suddenly people are scrambling to figure out what do we do with Fred. Now, postscript to that, Fred's sister stepped in. Even though I think there was some estrangement there over the years, Fred's sister still stepped in. She kind of oversaw some services for him, got him into a place that was caring for him well. And he's still doing fine. In fact, he's probably 75 now.
Okay.
And Margaret's still doing well, relatively well as well. But it was a shame it took that crisis to get sister in to start doing these things. And it was a rough, 6 months that are trying to get all these things sorted out. Don't do that. That could be dangerous, first of all, but it's a hassle at the very least.
Well, going along with that, I have the child that's nonverbal. So I would suggest, I think people are under the misconception that there aren't services for adults. So I worked really hard to get my nonverbal child a speaking device. It's a tablet. He's still learning, but I'm almost positive that there are other services out there for adults over the age of 18 that maybe previously had some sort of speaking device but don't have it anymore. Start asking these type of questions. Technology is always improving. And if you can give these people in your life ways to make themselves more independent, that's going to serve them longer in the future, especially after you're gone. Some housekeeping things for the parent, caregiver, whatnot. Get yourself a binder. Anything and everything that seems important, start to put it in there. Start to have these conversations with your loved ones, because going along with what you're talking about, we're the encyclopedias of our children. I know this myself because I'm that. And you can't possibly transmit all of the knowledge and all of the information, and you forget things. That's normal. There's no cookie cutter way of doing this, but the important part is to start. Don't leave your children or the people in your family less abled by you refusing to give them independence. Take these opportunities to increase their independence, because they're going to need it. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. that's spot on. You got to, as of right now, we can't download your entire brain onto a database. Now, maybe that will come up scarily enough. Maybe that'll come up in the future, but right now we can't do that. So get it down. Make sure people know what's going on. Don't be morbid. You want to make sure things are well put in place well ahead of time.
Did we cover everything that you wanted to know about?
I think we covered quite a bit of what I had intended to cover here.
Is there anything that you want to touch on?
Let's see. Hit the letters of intent. I think I really just wanted, again, and that's why I saved it for last, is just to hit on that. Don't wait. Mm-hmm. Don't wait. Do your planning ahead of time. That was the last issue I wanted to mention. If you are proactive and you do the planning, another advantage of that is you could oversee how that's going to work before you're going, so that mom and dad who knows that kid the best can make tweaks to the team, tweaks to the plan, can point out, forgot to put mustard on, I know I keep using that as an example, forgot to put no mustard in the plan, do you want to be able to do that ahead of time? Ideally, I know I'm a parent too, want to take care of our kids as long as we can. That's what we're here for. But as you age, you probably want to get to the point where start planning for and even start making that transition during your lifetime, so that you are there to see how that's going to work, and you can make those adjustments, not just throw it out there and immediately upon my passing, this is what's going to happen. If you are proactive about that, then you're also involved. I guess I have a success story to the opposite of Margaret, and I do have a family we're working with right now. They've been guardians of their son for years. Mm-hmm. He is very high functioning, executive functioning, executive maintenance. That's his really big limitation. Yeah. And we set up a supportive decision-making arrangement for him, and that eliminated the need for a guardian. Okay. And it's worked fairly well. We had a hiccup earlier this year, but mom and dad had kind of said, okay, they were the ones that resigned as guardians to start the supportive decision-making situation. Because they're still here and that didn't work, well, dad and mom was able to jump back in and say, okay, well, this didn't work. Let's help. We're going to help with making some adjustments to this plan. That's so valuable because they know their kid best. Of course. And by the way, no one's going to care for your kid the same way as well in the same way as you do. It's just never going to happen. But your goal is to put as much support around that to get as close to that as possible. Yeah. And that's one thing we had to talk through with this family. But they agreed. So okay, we like this. We can sit back and see how this is going to work to give us peace of mind. And, they've been very involved. Like I said, when something kind of fell off and didn't work, they stepped right back in and said, okay, we're going to fix this. And now we have the time to adjust, and we can give our input on how to do it, because we know our kid best, and we understand why this didn't work. So here's something else we can try. So again, the advantage of planning early is not just making sure you have a plan in place, but you can also you have the ability to get some peace of mind to see how this is going to work and make those tweaks to it ahead of time.
Yeah, worst case scenario, you really don't want a judge or someone else that can't even begin to know your child or their needs to be making these sorts of decisions. Be proactive. And if you're unsure, reach out to a lawyer and try and find some way to advocate for your child, because you're right. We know them best. Don't leave it in the hands of people that don't know them. Especially when they can't speak, especially if they're non-speaking or nonverbal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate this. And, I do see myself as a resource, obviously. I'm always running. If I'm not here in the office, I'm running to a baseball game or a band competition. But I do very much well see myself as a resource to the community. So, if there's issues that come up here, don't hesitate to info@stinsonlawfirm.com. We can put down in the comments. It's a good place to send out questions, and we've definitely tried to address it and try to get you to a resource. If we can't answer, get you in a resource that can help you, because that's my passion. That's what I like to do.
And I think you covered a little bit, but I ask everybody the same question. If they don't get anything else from this podcast, and we spoke about a lot of things, but the one thing that you want them to take away from all of this, like as far as who are you? Who are you and how do you want to come across? Like, if they can't remember anything else, what is that?
Trivial. I usually wear a bow tie, so usually I see this guy in bow tie, and then that triggers everybody. But I forgot the one on this morning. I'm what I try to do to set ourselves apart is we want to. I'm the person who wants to know your situation and get into. Again, it's hokey sometimes. I want to be part of your family. We're not Olive Garden. We don't want to treat you like family, but we want to be part of. We want to be part of the situation. So that's who I am. If you come into my office and any of my staff treat you like a number, then I failed. So that's who we are. Our culture here is to make sure we have the knowledge and familiarity with every one of our clients and what they're, try to empathize with what they're going through. We can't always sympathize, we can't always empathize, but we can certainly sympathize with them they go through as well. That's the best answer I can give.
All right. Well, I think that's a good answer.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. And if you guys have any questions or comments, you can always reach out to myself or to Stinson Law Group. And we're going to leave everything in the comments for you too. But like I said, please feel free to reach out, and we're here as a resource to help you all. So we'll see you next time. We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.